All right, well, we can get things started here today. So I don't, right. I don't see we have any guests, but let's see. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda for today? I don't see anyone in here from the public. But any topics that we need to, any additional topics we need to add or adjust to the agenda? The only thing maybe to add would be that the email from Josie. I don't know. I think Virginia and Keith, you were on that one about the what was the grant called?
The
Yeah,
rental revolving loan
Yeah.
fund.
I got that email. Connie CC'd me on it. I haven't had time to finish reading through it all, and it's quite a long email, but I got it like last night, 2 a.m. or whatever from Connie. So
Yes. Okay.
I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, it's kind of unclear whether that email is actually in the public domain or not. I mean, it's she sent it to me and Chris and Keith, and then other people got it. And anyway, the deadline for that application is the 29th of April, which is not possible.
Yeah.
So, we didn't think we wanted to spend too much time talking about it for this round of buttermilk, but good for getting started for the future rounds of buttermilk or whoever else. It's definitely something that we want to investigate, but
Okay. Well, maybe we just if we have some time at the end for other business, we can just touch on that real quick and see if there's anything that the housing committee could do to help in an effort like that, if the opportunity was to arise.
Well, I mean, what the housing committee can help me with is why did you receive that email? Did Josie send that to the committee? I thought it was just to a certain group of people, because I am concerned about ex parte.
I guess I was probably the last person to receive it. Connie sent me. Oh, let's see. I'm sorry. I was trying to read through it. 14 hours ago.
I received the same thread last night. Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't had a time to read through it. It's quite long, but
Yeah, it needs to be brought up in the committee for sure. And I know that I mean, we certainly can discuss it. It's not ex parte. I mean, you guys received it, but it's a little bit out of the norm, to be honest with you. I'm not sure why the housing committee, although the housing committee is I feel is the forum for that email for sure. Certainly should be involved in that. I'm just a little bit concerned about the process there. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, so please don't be concerned about that. We'll just move forward.
Okay.
I mean,
well, we can.
There's always this whole question of, if you get an email to you and then you start passing it around to other people, is that okay? I mean, have you checked with those other people who sent it to you if that was okay that you pass it around to these other people? I don't know. It was the whole thing was a little weird, but whatever. It's good to be aware of the rental revolving loan fund, and how can we position ourselves to make use of it in the future. And it's great. It's a great topic. This kind of thing is, and Josie said, okay, the application is due by April 29th, and the town has to have skin in the game, and that might be $450,000. And I'm on vacation, she said, and like, what do you do with that kind of thing that comes in on the 24th of April? So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't give us much time to have any type of consideration there, if that was the go forward plan.
Agreed.
All right. Well, Okay, so we had the meeting minutes from last month, March 27th meeting. Those were posted. Any adjustments or changes or amendments to those meeting minutes?
Looked good.
Connie did a great job.
Yep. Fine on my end.
Perfect. So we'll move forward with those minutes as written. And then, I know this has been something that Keith has put together around the affordable housing definitions. It's kind of gotten bumped the past couple of meetings, but thinking it was maybe a good opportunity to just kind of level the discussion around affordable housing definitions and what does that mean. So Keith,
Yeah.
I'll turn that over to you as to kind of talk through the working draft.
Yeah, and I'll pull that up in a second. It's basically a primer. You know, it's just to describe what these different programs are and what affordable housing is as described and defined in the state of Vermont. Let me pull that up. Oh boy, I got lots of things open. Give me 1 second, folks.
While he's doing that, I mean, one of the reasons that this has come up was because of buttermilk discussion. You know, the fact that the way they use buttermilk, the way the public uses, the way they use affordable housing, the way the public uses affordable housing, the way we talk about affordable housing, we're not always or often talking about the same thing. You know, housing that's relatively affordable to people is the way the public talks about that. We want affordable housing that our children can afford to come and live here, you know, or are we really talking about affordable housing as it's defined in the statute? So I don't know, whenever you're ready, Keith.
I'm good to go. And I would say, I mean, if you folks have read it, if you have any questions, I mean, I probably don't need to just, you know, start reading this unless you wish me to. But I mean, it is an umbrella term for housing that is affordable. It depends on the program type. And Matt, you're obviously aware of what that means from the Cathedral Square point of view.
Well,
And-
yeah, exactly. I mean, what's affordable versus what would be considered like affordable low income are two very different
Yes,
numbers, right? So,
right.
I mean, a current affordable housing, not any kind of state subsidized, is significantly higher, obviously.
Right.
So,
Right. It's almost, I mean, it could be even considered market rate, you know, depending on what the rate is, you know. But I mean, when I hear affordable housing, I hear subsidized housing. I hear HUD, I hear Section 8. You know, that's the way I was trained. Here in Vermont, it seems to be a catch-all for housing that's affordable also, and workforce housing. And that's fine. We just need to present it and utilize it properly. And at least that's my opinion. If you don't agree with that, I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not an interchangeable subject here. And what we're trying to do in the Planning Commission is to hopefully get some affordable housing in Jolena Court specifically. But overall, I mean, what we need to do is set the environment for a subsidized housing developer to come in. And we haven't set that environment yet. So this is kind of a stab on what exactly do we want to do? What exactly does affordable housing mean? And it's not a perfect document by any stretch. It needs to be, you know, tightened up a little bit, but it does give you the basics and hits the high points. So I would ask that, you know, you take a look at it if you haven't already. Shoot me some questions or shoot some questions now at this point.
So is
I
that
guess-
where? Go ahead, Virginia.
Oh, who else? Somebody else was speaking. That's fine. If whoever else wants to speak. Was that Matt?
nope, I wasn't speaking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
After you, Virginia.
Okay. So my interest in the matter is when this term is used, that we're all talking about the same thing right then. So if somebody from the public comes and says, well, where's the affordable housing? We can differentiate in the way we talk about it between affordable housing programs that work from the VHFA median income table that are income sensitive? Is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about things that people consider to be relatively affordable? So that we always modify it with some kind of term so that we understand, are we talking about relatively affordable housing? Are we talking about truly program affordable housing, which in the state language means there's an income sensitivity piece.
Right.
It means that, it's relative to a certain amount of income that people make, this rent. And often people don't think about that. They just think about, well, the rent's pretty low or whatever it is. So that we make sure, and I've been trying to promote this term workforce housing, which is housing where the rental level is off the AMI chart for 80%, let's say, but there's no income sensitivity piece. It's just a way of talking about how much the rent is. And that's only half of actual affordable housing. The actual affordable housing piece has to do with people's income who live there. So with Buttermilk, they talk about affordable housing, that they're providing affordable housing. Well, they're small units, and so the rent comes in at a level on the chart for AMI that is at 80% or below, and they call that affordable housing. Well, there's no measurement of the income of the people who are living there. So if we could call that workforce housing, which means the rent is pretty low, and sometimes it's market rate, but the rent is just pretty low because they're only 260 square feet. And so you can't really get away with charging too much for that in the current market. So
yeah, and that's Virginia, that brings up a really good point, because I think the chart we're using, I always use the HUD chart on the HUD website that does it based on area and median income. It shows the fair rental value, and then 80% of that. Is that
We use the VHBC, but it's the same chart basically. It's the same data.
okay? See, and there's another point, right, where there's a point of confusion, and I would like to see it separated by, are we saying it's state subsidized, or is it affordable based on like what Virginia said, meaning it falls under a certain threshold of area and median income there. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
yeah, so we have been using that also to say subsidized housing for housing, which is actually, somebody is kicking in money
Right.
to make sure that this is not more than 30% of the income of the people who live there. Somebody is kicking in money. It's subsidized housing at some level or other. Now, even that can be a little confusing, because the Buttermilk people want to think that when they're controlling the rent at a certain level, they're really subsidizing it. They're they're taking a loss for it. So they're subsidizing it from the rent of the other. I've had this conversation with them. So they kind of feel a little bit like they're subsidizing it, because you have to make up that money somewhere. If you're controlling the rent at a certain level, even if it's market rate, you're not getting as much as you could. So anyway, despite that, I think talking about it as subsidized is helpful, at least, as opposed to just talking about it being relatively inexpensive. If you see what I mean.
So
Yeah.
would you, in that case, are you saying that the Buttermilk rents would be considered subsidized?
No.
Well, they're not really
No.
subsidized. They're not, but
Okay.
they think of it a little bit like that, because
Sure.
when they take it to the bank to get financing for the building, the bank's going to want to know how they're going to make up the loss that they're taking by controlling the rent at this level.
But are they intentionally doing that? Like, do they have a chart that they're looking at to say, I thought it was more just because they had the smaller units, right? Like,
Well, they
so
point
they're-
out that they're at 80% AMI, for instance. They say, well,
Sure.
with these studios, we're at 80% AMI. And, if, for instance, the planning commission were to put in the zoning that they only get, let's say, extra units as bonus units if they control the rent to that level, then they're going to feel that they're taking a loss, and so they have to make it up somehow. But
So
Sure.
just
maybe
so
their
we're,
problem. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, just so we're clear, I think it's important from a numbers standpoint. I just sent everyone kind of what I'm using because it makes it easier to understand. Are they efficiencies or one bedrooms? Since they're only
It's
260
Studio. They're known as a micro studio.
so they're an efficiency essentially.
Correct, correct.
Okay. And they're
And
taking 80% of the fair market rent of the what you could rent it for essentially
Right.
is what they're
well, so if you look at the chart, the VHFA chart, which is your HUD chart, you go to the Franklin County statistical, Burlington, South Burlington statistical area, and you
Yep.
read across the chart, and under studio, in the columns that says maximum gross rent affordable, and you look at a studio at 80% AMI, it's $1,590. That's for a studio of any size. It doesn't say what it could be 260 square feet or it could be 500 square feet. It's a studio of any size. You're going to have, so for us, that's, 80% of AMI, but maybe it's market rate for that size of studio. But they call it affordable housing because the rent is at 80% AMI, just
Yeah.
off the chart.
see, and
And
that's
they
all.
claim they have two bedrooms that are at 80% AMI. We haven't seen all the rents, but they
Right.
claim it's not just the little tiny studios, but
And I have found this confusing. Actually, I think this is a really good point. Because so what I sent you guys is the HUD one. It's fair market rents, and they have an efficiency for fiscal year 2024, fair market rent at $1,341. So
but
80%.
is it for this area, the Burlington, South Burlington statistical area?
Yep. It's actually Richmond town. You can dial in based on the town even. So
I didn't
that's
see any numbers in here. Where were the numbers? The rent
Sorry, are you
numbers.
talking to me? What I sent?
Yeah, where?
So maybe I can share my screen. I've never actually done that. Even though
Oh,
you-
this is
that.
Keith. Oh, got it.
yeah.
hang on
Oh,
a second.
Keith, bring that link up. If you have it. The one I sent through Zoom
Yep.
there on the chat.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, you're gonna have to go back through the thing and like fill out the. Maybe I can hold on a second. I'll send a better link.
Got it. Okay, so this was a calculated link that didn't come through fully, I guess. Okay.
Now let me share the screen, okay?
Sure, you're gonna share my screen. Is that
Yeah,
what it says?
I'm gonna give you the power to share.
Oh, okay.
You're good to go.
Share my screen. Sure.
Yeah, so be down with the green where it says share screen.
Yes. Great.
So
Oh, boy.
this exercise, though, just to be clear, was just to make sure that we're understanding what affordable housing is and all the differences. That's really what the exercise is here for.
Right, but I think it's important that we're all on the same page of where we're getting the.
Absolutely.
sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's weird that the numbers are different,
Yeah.
from VHFA numbers and HUD numbers, that they're different for the same statistical area.
Yeah, and I mean, because when you deal with AMI and you deal with those amounts of rent, you're also including the utilities in with that, not cable, but heat, water, and the like. So, I mean, it is inclusive.
That's actually a really good point. You're right. You're absolutely right, Keith. That's probably the disconnect there is the
Yep.
HUD one doesn't include utilities.
And they
That-
wouldn't know that, right?
Right. Sorry, it's gonna force me to quit and reopen this. Do we want to keep going moving forward here? I don't want to waste too much time on
Well,
this.
so in Vermont, you're gonna have to use the Vermont numbers.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
where,
really Burlington Housing. Oh God, Burlington. What is it? I have a Section 8 tenant. Is it Burlington Housing Agency? I'm drawing a blank right now.
It's Housing Authority, I believe.
Burlington Housing Authority.
Yeah.
They use the HUD number.
Did they include the utilities?
No, that's the reason why. No, not because I don't include the utilities in this rent. It's all separate utilities. And so they use
So-
the HUD number.
Okay, so they're only required to have 30% of their income pay for the rent portion, not
That's-
including the utilities, right?
That's correct. And then Burlington Housing Authority covers whatever that difference is. So,
I know when you're looking at the loan programs, you have to go with the the Vermont numbers.
what
That's
is,
it's what
just
you
so
look
we're clear, because it's actually really good to know, like, I don't, obviously, since what is that?
Let
Maybe
me see
somebody
if I-
can send a link there to that actually instead, so we can all see that. I'm sorry if
It's
everyone else
under-
got this already.
It's under the Vermont Housing Finance Agency's website,
Oh, VHFA,
VHFA
okay.
website, and it's the maximum rent and purchase price affordability thresholds
Right.
by income and household size is what this table is called. And I mean, I don't know why in Vermont you have to include the utilities and or in Burlington, they don't include the utilities. Why is that when you're supposed to include the utilities or?
Well, no, all my rentals, none of the utilities are included. You're not actually
Yeah.
required by law to include utilities. You separate as long as everything is separately metered, then the tenants can pay the utilities. And so
well,
that's
I
why-
think it's not necessarily if utilities are included in the rent, but is if in the calculation of that 30%
Correct.
to your
Right.
income,
Yep.
that includes the rent that you're paying and the utilities, whether you pay the landlord for
Or
those
not.
utilities or you pay the
Right.
Correct.
water department for the utilities, all that should still be included in that calculation, I guess.
Yeah, so if you see my cursor coming down here, this is what
Yep.
the studio
Yep.
right there.
And so they're taking 80% of that, which is, I'm sorry, how much is that? Somebody's had it already figured out.
1590,
Yeah.
1,590.
that's 80%.
Oh, that is 80%.
Yeah, so 100%
That's
is
80%.
1990. There's 100% right here.
Wow. That doesn't
It's mind-boggling, but it's
it's good to
Burlington,
know to me,
too.
but that doesn't seem affordable to me. I mean, I rent one bedrooms for 13 something. So anyways.
Yeah, so you can say that those are,
Yeah.
their workforce, they're affordable under the sheer numbers, but you're not required necessarily to have somebody for whom that is only 30% of their income.
Yeah.
So,
Does anyone know if Buttermilk does include all their utilities? Are they all central?
No,
I
I don't believe they do.
I don't think so. I actually walked by there the other day and it looks like everything is looks like they have like a 14 meter pack. They have all
They
separate
do.
electrical at least.
I would be curious if it's included with rent, though, I guess. I mean, maybe it was constructed that manner, but if it is not included at rent and they're using 1590 as a affordable number based on this chart, if that's the number they're floating to Virginia in conversations, that seems kind
It's
of
huge.
deceiving, I think, is what Virginia's alluding to.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
yeah,
So
so,
that would be a good question to know from them. And for us in the future, I mean, you might have to look at scenarios where you look at, unfortunately, the numbers Matt's referencing and the VHFA, because if HUD doesn't factor in utilities, not every property built will be able to have no utility, utilities paid for through the program, depending upon what you're modifying or building. So
Mhm.
in theory, a new building like Buttermilk is built with, modern type equipment where everything can be all centralized and you don't have to have standalone units, but that won't always be the case.
Right.
I think actually buttermilk, the way I've seen it, I think this is actually happening more and more because heat pumps are so popular. We use them in all of our rentals because they're incredibly efficient, they're affordable, and we don't have to deal with natural gas then. They're all actually usually standalone units, so each unit has its own, each apartment has its own heat pump, and then they're separately metered usually.
Right.
Now on some of the big stuff at like Finney Crossing, I don't think they're separately metered like that, but that's hundreds of units. So anyways.
All
Yeah,
right,
and
so
I mean, I guess it only matters if you're talking to people like Buttermilk who are making this claim that, you know, it's affordable per the AMI 80% number. You
Yeah,
know, so,
yeah.
and I don't know why some do, you know, why it's okay. I thought that in Vermont it was required that you have the utilities added in there, but it's clearly not required if you don't have the utilities added in there, so that you use the other chart. But
That's
so
good.
we'll have to have the two charts, I guess.
Yeah.
It would be really, really good, Virginia, since you guys are the ones dealing with them, to know what they are actually including for utilities
Mm-hmm.
for their tenants. I think that would be worthwhile to know.
I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, if they're not including utilities, I think that HUD chart is pretty accurate, and HUD updates that every fiscal year. So, anyways.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'll tighten that up. We'll make sure we know what we're talking about. I appreciate that because I mean it was an assumption that, you know, they were including the utilities in there. It didn't really dawn on me on that. So
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's clearly actually really confusing because we have all these different agencies, state, federal, etc., and yet there's all these separate metrics they use to define affordable, right? So it's like what's the how do you actually determine it, because there's no common denominator. So
yeah, but I mean to have a developer who's doing market rate claiming that they have an AMI based on this chart and not really differentiating if you have or you're not or you don't have utilities.
yeah,
It's a little wishy-washy there, and we need to tighten that up for sure. Yeah.
sure.
And in the state, you know, I believe in the state material that they put out, for instance, under Act 47, if you have a building that is 20% affordable units per their definition, then you get certain perks. You can go 1 story higher
40%,
or have 40% density additional,
or
which
both.
are big perks, or both. You know, that's what it says. And under the definition of affordable housing, it has the utilities added to the rent. So, you know, it's a few $100s difference, but so it really does make a difference which chart you're using, whether you get those benefits or not.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you know, that's what the state says, is it has to include the utilities in order for it to be considered affordable housing. So
Subsidized affordable housing. That's the difference.
except they don't use the word subsidized in the state. You know,
It's-
the legislature doesn't bother to make it that clear.
Yeah, I guess we kind
Yeah.
of closed the loop on that one.
That's a really good point, because Section 8 vouchers do not require utilities to be included, but project-based vouchers, which a project like Buttermilk would most likely use, would require utilities to be included.
Right.
So
Or
it-
anything that Cathedral Square would do or something along those
Yes.
lines. Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I guess we can't really fix that, right? But what we
Maybe
can,
not, but I would definitely I would definitely make sure, especially in a recorded meeting, whether or not, you know, like I said, they had at least 12 meter sockets and 12 meters over there when I went for a walk the other day. So are they paying why would you separate utilities? Because it actually costs a lot from an electrical standpoint.
Yeah.
if you're not planning on having your tenants pay the utilities.
Yeah,
Anyways.
I mean, to be clear, I mean, Buttermilk is not proposing subsidized housing at all. They're just claiming that they're offering 80% AMI, and now that's a dubious claim. That's really where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're claiming that they're offering affordable housing. That is their claim. They're not claiming subsidized, but they're using those words.
Yeah.
That, look, of the goodness of our heart, we're providing affordable housing because the rent is at 80% AMI. That's the way they use affordable, the word affordable. And, you can't truly use that unless you have the income sensitivity piece, and they don't do any of that. So we just want to try to have the discussion in a way that we're all talking about the same thing.
Yep.
And whether we can make Buttermilk talk about it in any other way is questionable. They're going to talk about it the way they want to talk about it. But we can always find out these things like, are you including the utilities? Is this subsidized in any way? And blah, 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 so that we know. And for the public, we really want to make sure that we're not just talking about things that are less expensive than some other things, because that's what their concern is, that it's just relatively inexpensive. And to get into the details like this of what actual subsidized housing is and how it works and how you do it, how you bring it about, that's a whole other conversation. So anyway.
Another level. Yeah, totally. But
Yeah.
good.
At the very least, I think, like, just making sure they're not flat out lying to you guys about this
Yeah.
is valuable,
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Stretching the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
And
the other thing to think about just with some of these definitions, right, is how the community perceives maybe some of the work that we're doing, right? I mean, I think that affordable housing has that stigma of being subsidized housing, which maybe has a certain clientele that's living there, right? Which
Yep.
gets some folks uneasy, right, about how Richmond might change, right? But I think the piece is that housing that is more affordable, or affordable housing, and how do we refer to that, right, is like the teachers that are teaching your schools, your students in school, your kids in school, and the folks that have pretty normal jobs
That's the
but are
workforce.
getting priced out of the market. So I think that's also where we want to help align on how we're speaking to these terms, right? And communicating in a way that we're not talking about necessarily bringing in Section 8 housing to Richmond. We're talking about bringing in housing that people that want to live here and work here can live and work here.
Yeah, workforce housing can be a term, it's a relatively new term in planning, based on my research. And it does have a stigma to it, but it is being accepted more and more. And that's housing that's affordable for the workforce. That's really, really all it is. And I don't know, is that what we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on Section 8? Do we want to focus on housing that's affordable? I think we want to focus on a suite of housing options, to be honest with you. That's where I'm at mentally. And I'm not sure how this committee wants to go forward with that. And obviously that's on the agenda.
So are we aligning on 3 definitions here? We have affordable housing, workforce housing, and subsidized housing. Is that kind of how we're aligning here?
Well,
I'd eliminate affordable.
That's exactly right. I would completely get rid of affordable because I think it's misleading and confusing. I actually like that term, workforce housing. I think it really speaks to, for lack of a better word, like blue collar, workforce housing, right? That's what it used to be called. And then I think it should be called subsidized housing personally, because in some way or another it's subsidized.
Yeah, I see it as market rate, workforce, subsidized.
Correct.
Kind of in the order of what it costs.
And the other way that people can think about it is the workforce housing is moderate income housing, and the like 30% AMI. You know, I mean, this chart, you can have different percentages of AMI that they're all on the affordable housing spectrum, if you want to put it like that. 30% AMI. That's very low income, you know, for people who are
Right.
very low income. 50%, 60%, 80%, which is what the Act 47 statute
Standard.
is talking about. It says 80% AMI or 120% if you're selling, you know, if it's not a rental. But if it's a condo or a house, then you can be at 120% AMI. So it's like low income or ultra low income. And then you have moderate income, which to me is the workforce housing is moderate income. So that's
So-
sometimes more acceptable to people to think about that, because the HUD truly subsidized low income, where you pay $300 a month for your apartment and somebody else pays the rest. That's ultra low income housing. Well, we need that too, obviously, because we have all these homeless people. So then we need the one that's for the teachers and the firefighters and the nurses or whatever, which is
Agreed.
moderate income housing.
I just wanted to comment. I mean, I like the concept of workforce housing. My only concern is we're talking in a small meeting here. When these ideas are presented to places like the DRB and wherever else, they're using very precise words through Act 47 to identify what they're applying for and what they want to build. So it could get confusing to have terminology here. I think something like Act 47 is something that really helps point us in the direction of the proper language to use when talking to the public, so everybody's reading the same information. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, I think we need a translation with all these terms, what they are equivalent to. Because frankly, the Act 47, the stuff that comes out of the legislature isn't that helpful. It just says affordable housing. And we know that affordable housing means all these different things, you know? So we need to have an equivalence somehow. Workforce housing is moderate income housing for the teachers and nurses is equal to, you know, the higher levels of AMI that are referenced in the statute. So, and hopefully we can explain that to the DRB and to the public. I mean, because it is complicated. It's not like there's a simple way that you can really deal with it. I understand your point exactly, Andrew, because, you know, they are going to use these words and we're going to use these words. It's like people out there saying, well, it's relatively affordable is what we want, which has nothing to do with any of these charts or anything, you know, but that's what they're thinking in their mind. So we have to have a way to kind of make equivalences so that we can bring everybody into the same, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Actually,
absolutely agree. I just think it leads to then people having so
Yeah.
many different terminologies, and then we have to educate people on when you hear this, think this, and when you think this, think this. So I don't know what the answer is right now.
Right.
I'm not as educated as you on Act 47. I need to sharpen my knife a little bit on it, but it seems that it would lead to confusion when making big decisions about where to invest opportunity and money based on affordable housing, because there is a reference point somewhere that they will determine that Act 250 or other programs will determine this is the number and cutoff that gets you 75 units in a gross center without going through Act 250.
Right.
So that's there has to be Montpelier, unfortunately, yes, it doesn't always make sense, but that's the world that we have to kind of structure our heads in, because they're the boss at the end of the day, and we have to react to laws they pass at a local level.
Yeah, well, we need then, I think, a way to refer to the official affordable housing, which is used quite loosely by the legislature. I mean, there are definitions as to what they mean. but that's also an additional step.
My issue too, I agree with Virginia that I shared, Andrew, I don't know if you were part of the group yet or not. I shared a really good document from an attorney friend of ours who did it for our real estate company, on Act 47. But long story short, did I share that with you guys? Did anyone get that? This was a while ago. It's pretty long. All right, I should upload it to the group thing. Anyways, long story short, it's incredibly vague, Act 47, and it's the guidance isn't actually really it's not really put in there, and it essentially says all the towns need to enact to these changes, right, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
But when, how, is very like that's not even determined. So I know for myself personally, you want to act on this on Act 47, but because they say, yeah, you have to do it, but then they say, but the towns are the ones that are going to institute it. You have the obviously bureaucracy at the town level of trying to figure out how to institute it, but it's vague. So it's like you can't actually pass anything or apply for a permit, anything with Act 47 related stuff right now in a lot of the towns.
Well, so a couple of things about that is, one is Act 47 became law in July of last summer.
Right.
So it is actually the law, whether it's in your zoning or not, doesn't matter. So, it's required that you have a density of 5 units per acre in any area served by water and sewer. So even though our zoning doesn't say that, that is the law. And if you go to get a permit, that's what is required.
Right.
That's allowed.
I agree, and I haven't had to deal with this in Richmond yet, but in Williston, there's huge pushback because we have a half-acre lot, which we only have 1 unit on, which we wanted to add more units, and I guess I could take them to court, but I haven't pushed it that far yet. They're not like accepting permit, right? Like they're not going to.
They're not following the law. Yeah, they're essentially not following the law. And there are, the provisional guidance out of ACCD, who worked on this a lot. There are provisional guidelines that we received in the fall, which they say they were going to finalize, but they haven't even finalized those yet. And there's more discussion about it during this legislative session, whether there are things that want to be changed. And we have, contacted Jacob Hemrick over in ACCD to get answers to these particular questions that we have. And he's like, well, I don't really know the answer to that question. Right. So
yeah, and that's basically what the zoning admin tied me up. She came back with this incredibly long email. I don't want to get into my specific thing. It's just, long story short, it's like the hurdles are immense, and there's a lot of tape, essentially a lot of red tape involved trying to act on it. So
yeah, well, we're working on it. We're changing things in our zoning to make them accord with what we perceive as Act 47 requiring of us.
Right.
So
we administer it at the zoning level. We are administering that. As soon as July 1, pulled around last year, we're obligated to apply that law.
No, absolutely. And I wasn't saying this in regards to Richmond. I was saying it as because it's so vague, it's incredibly difficult for any of these kind of definitions or actions to actually currently happen.
But you're right. And to Virginia's point, we did ask for clarification. They can't give us clarification. So what do? We do the best we can do. That's really all we can.
Right. Exactly. So
not a fun position to be in. It's just not. But it's what it is.
Keith, who sent this? Keith, did you send this about the buttermilk project? Oh, Lisa Miller sent this.
Lisa did.
Yeah, that's from what Buttermilk introduced, I believe.
So that's so misleading. No offense to them. The last line. Rental rates.
What is this document that you're talking about?
I'll pull it up.
Okay.
Oh,
Did
No,
you
it's in
just
the
get it
chat.
just now?
oh, it's not it's in the chat.
It's-
Sorry, it's in the
Oh.
meeting
It's in the
chat.
chat.
Okay. This is something new to all of us, right? We haven't.
Well, because that's the only utility, right, Matt? That's
Yeah, that's total bullshit. Sorry, that's bullshit. Everything's heat pumps there. So the only thing, yeah, they're
It's
including
all electric.
water. They're including
sewer.
water, sewer, and
Garbage.
probably internet
Yeah.
or whatever.
No,
So
and-
anyway,
internet's not included.
I'll just chime in because I sent that, but I don't know how to get it to everybody, but I just looked at their ad for the creamery. I assume it's the original units. It says rental rates include all the utilities except for electricity and internet. And I thought, well, what else is there? I guess
Right.
heat
Gas.
No,
pumps.
No,
no, all the
garbage.
heat, all the heat are heat pumps, so it's all electric.
Ah, okay.
So
Yeah,
water and sewer. I mean, that's
Yes,
that's-
water and
so,
sewer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yep.
Well, they
And-
do have the solar panels, so I wonder if the solar panels are powering the house meter, which maybe is tied to their heat or something like that.
Bingo. No, the house meter's totally tied to all the yeah, that's exactly what it's tied to.
Right. So, yeah, each person gets like 1 or 2% of the solar, maybe.
Not really, because if the house meter is probably powering the lights and the common areas of
Ah,
the
right.
apartment building. So actually the landlord's probably getting, I don't know, this they're
yeah,
probably
we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's incredibly misleading in my opinion. So
Well, I mean, so rental, it's not a lie. Rental rates include all utilities except electricity and internet. So, I mean, it's only misleading if you're trying to say that it meets the affordable housing definition, but they're not trying to say that in their ad to the public. You know,
oh, okay.
they're just saying this about their apartments. So if a prospective renter comes along, that they
Right.
know what they're getting, and they would have to find out if they were interested. Okay, so what is the electricity cost about per month? You know, give us an estimate of what it's about. So the way it's part of the fact that they use the affordable term very loosely when they're talking to us, but they would like to get the advantage of it.
Right.
Without exactly defining what it is that they're talking about.
And now we know, we see what's going on there. Okay.
So yeah, and I mean just based on the initial line there too, I have some what I would consider luxury rental units, new builds that are really nice, and I rent them for $2,400 a month. So I'm guessing the $2,600 a month ones are their bigger 2 bedrooms. That's obviously
Are yours 2 bedrooms? The ones that
Yep.
you're just talking about just now, they're 2 bedrooms.
they are
Okay.
2 bedrooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I consider those like luxury, right? Those aren't affordable. Those are market rate. So
Mhm.
this clearly they're talking about market rate, but it's confusing to me because I don't know a single rental unit, even a studio that's $1,000 a month brand new, especially in Richmond, Vermont. So I'm just confused by that range of prices, 1,000 to 2,600.
Yeah, I don't know how up to date it is, to be honest with you. You know,
Okay.
That could be outdated from a
Yeah.
number of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we've
All
beaten
right,
it.
well, let's move on here.
Sorry.
So do we want to do
Because
any follow-up with this? I mean, would we like to try to make a list of what the equivalences of these terms are, or how are we going to go forward with understanding this and conveying this to the people we're talking to, including the DRB, the select board, the people out there in the world?
Virginia, would you say that workforce housing is then that 80% AMI number? Would you consider that? What would you consider to be, is 80% affordable for somebody making whatever, 50 to 75,000 a year? Doesn't seem it to me, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm on Social Security, so I don't really know, but
Well,
$1,250
okay.
a
at
month.
least my house is paid
$1,250 a
for.
month.
I would like to
$1,250
keep
a
it
month would be 30%.
right. So I'd like to keep it simple. If we're going to use those 3 terms: market rate, workforce, and subsidized, I'd want to keep it simple, saying workforce housing is equal to 60% AMI or 80% AMI, whatever the number is. I don't know what we would consider the number to be, but it should be that number, right? Whereas
Mhm.
market rate is 100% or above, and subsidized is, let's say, 40% or below or something, right? Like that would be the
Yeah,
the
that would be what would be good, I think, is if that's what we were talking about. And does it include the utilities? Because that's another few $100s, right?
absolutely.
So I don't know. I mean, Andrew, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think you would have to, if we're going to be talking about something at the DRB, you would say affordable housing based on the VHFA AMI number right here.
Hmm.
Because you would just need to be able to distinguish what type of property is it, how are the utilities set up, who's doing what, if it's off public sewer water, great. But it's just nobody else, like Keith said, workforce development is slowly making its way in. If we were to use that as our local common, that's what goes in as we update zoning. We just need to educate people.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about when we reference workforce development. Hey, Buttermilk, you'll make us happy if you meet these numbers right here and give them exactly what it is. I'm indifferent on which language to use. I just think it's really important that it doesn't, if we're going to call it workforce, that we're using a chart and a number that is very easily identifiable and you can direct to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
like-
are
Makes
you,
sense.
the 60 to 80% is good for you for workforce?
Yeah, what was it was like 1590 was
So for a
80%
studio,
for a studio.
60%
crazy.
is 1,195. That's 60% AMI for a studio. 1,195. 80% is 1,590.
Which chart are you using?
I'm using the
have one-
VHFA chart
The VHFA.
with
Yeah, I'm
the
seeing
utilities.
16.6. I'm seeing 16.65 at 80%. Did it go up? I wonder
Which
if you
chart?
have, you have the,
Shoot,
Do you
it
have
just
the-
got up. I just opened up the recent. Yeah, April 2024. It changed.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm at the 2024
Inflation
one.
at its finest.
yeah.
There's the one that I was looking at. So the
Okay.
80% is a 16.665. 16.65 is 80%.
So we would have to specify the April 2024 chart if it's before like April 2025, when it will likely go up again. And we would specify which one of those numbers we want to use. What's the 60% number?
12.50.
50. Yeah. So I would argue that we would want to actually say, yes, between 60 and 80% AMI, because 60% AMI would be somebody, a one-person household, so one person making $50,000 a year gross income,
Hmm.
whereas 80% is 66,600. And I think, I honestly don't even know the salaries of the entry salaries of somebody did actually at one
do.
point. Yeah. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but does that seem, Keith, does that seem like those numbers are?
It's like it was the mid 40s to blow for a police officer and a teacher. Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
About
Yeah,
50,
it's on the
50K.
sheet we passed out at the town meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
So then doesn't that seem like the logical place to kind of be between 60 and 80 for the middle for workforce housing?
we'll call
If we're going
workforce.
to talk about what's affordable, like if just let's put our real world caps on, it's 60%. Like that's not 80% really in a reasonable world seems almost like market, and 120 seems luxury. So if we're going to look for ways to encourage things that help people be here, you got to lean on the lower end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If we're going to start to structure town ideas and concepts around what's affordable and workforce makes, Matt, the number like 50K. That's a
Right.
contributing workforce person who's not no offense to any industry, not like a entry level service worker, and it's not an executive. It's somebody who has got a few years experience in the workforce that's trying to contribute to the local community. They're not passing through. So that would be a focus for me would be find people that are looking to live and contribute to Richmond in not spectacular, high-paying jobs, because you need all levels of a workforce. So,
Right.
yeah, 60%.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so that's your workforce number, and then 100% and above is, or above 60%, I guess, is
Market rate.
market rate. And low income is, you know, whatever you want to call that, more like
Yeah,
below
subsidized.
60%.
Subsidized, I think, would be below 60%, probably. Probably, actually, just looking at that chart again.
I mean, it's going to have to be subsidized if it's at 60%. If this is really the market rate that's going, then, you know, for anybody to live anywhere,
Are all
at
the
60%, it's going to have to be subsidized somehow.
No, you're right. Absolutely. uh yeah,
I think it's, I mean, just a simple fact that we're discussing the differences between what affordable housing is the object of this. And, you know, if we want to promulgate what in the town of Richmond, what workforce is, then we'll need to, as Andrew was saying, we need to put a number on it. It needs to be empirical.
yeah.
And you need to have a link to where that number is coming from, because it's going to be updated on an annual basis. And, you know, that's what we're thinking through, you know, at the planning commission to a certain extent. But, you know, this all has to do with subsidized housing, and it does have that income component to it. That's, you know, that's the balance we're trying to do here. You know, I mean, how can you oversee that from a zoning perspective, from an administration perspective? It's very difficult unless you are a housing authority.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Zoning
again,
office can do it.
I would love to just put a black and white number on all this, and Virginia's right. As soon as we go below a certain percentage, then it becomes subsidized, and then as soon as it becomes subsidized, there is a there's a certain level of distaste for that, right? Because unfortunately, we all know this. There's, you know, poverty leads to issues and crime and drug use, whatever, right? And it's like there's very consistent statistics on the subsidized housing has a lot of these problems, right? I'm stating the obvious here, right? To people, it's not a,
There is.
and you know, like the subsidized housing that for people we have, I have been incredibly selective, and it takes a really long time to make sure. So being able to define the subsidized housing, and, you know, if a entry-level police officer or school teacher needs subsidized housing and they're getting a Section 8 voucher, I mean, no offense, they're way different than potentially another person, right?
Something wrong with that.
Yeah, that's because most people spend more than 30% of
Right.
income.
Exactly.
I mean,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know, on their housing, most people spend at least 50%, if not more.
Yep.
So it's not
I-
subsidized. It's just that they're spending more on their housing and less on other things.
I turn away anybody doesn't have 30. I know other people that I will not rent. If it's more than 30% of your income, I won't rent to you, because it puts everyone in a bad situation, the tenant, the landlord, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a business decision for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
helping too.
So does Keith, does it make sense to maybe have that document that you wrote up adjusted to include these three kind of categories that we just talked about here?
Yeah, I can expand on it and get a draft to at the next meeting. I'll put that on as an agenda item.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'll probably be reaching out. Well, I mean, we'll do the minutes. I'll see what the minutes say if I have any questions.
Yeah.
So I didn't capture all this, where you wanted the workforce at 60%, 40%. I'm not exactly sure where you are there. We could fill those blanks in.
I mean, it's troublesome that almost everybody needs to have subsidized housing. You know, how is that a working system of, you know, under capitalism? Does that really work to have almost everybody have subsidized housing? That doesn't seem like it's like a
Sustainable.
recipe for a good, yeah, sustainable. But anyway, we probably shouldn't go there.
If we had a greater supply, right? I mean, we all know the issue is actually stemmed almost from 15 years ago from what has been a direct result of a housing shortage, which has been caused by, we all know, many, many, many factors.
Many.
So it's, yeah, I
Just
mean,
one.
yeah. So,
And one other quick comment before we get off this topic is I'm trying to promote and figure out how to make it work at the Planning Commission, a discussion about the difference between villages and urban areas. And that we need to not just necessarily think that all of these concepts translate exactly from an urban area to a village setting, because I mean, that's on people's minds. And also there are things that maybe don't work when you don't like have any support services or anything like that in the village setting. So maybe people can think about that and push back against it if you don't think that's a good thing to be thinking about. But it just seems like we may not want to think that across the board, villages and cities are the same. And so we're going to introduce the same concepts in villages and cities. I don't know. Anyway,
I agree.
something to think about.
We don't have the resources. That's a very good point. I mean, just the basic one. We don't even have a police force right now. And as soon as, you know, if you start doing a lot of these larger housing programs, without any kind of police force, there can be issues.
Yeah, and you have to have the staff to, you know, if you do have anything that is really affordable housing, you have to have the staff to keep up with that and look at it and, you know, look at people's income and kick them out, I guess, if they're over the proper income. I don't know what you do with your property, Matt, but what if somebody comes in at a low income level and then gets above the income threshold? Do they have to go?
Well, you
Oh,
said
no,
that-
I was saying, sorry, I guess I wasn't clear on that. I was saying I don't let people rent one of my apartments unless if their income, if they're going to be spending more than 30% of their income on one of my apartments. So when they apply for it as a rental, you know, let's say the apartment is just $1,000, you know, if their income is, you know, if they're going to be using more than their 30% annual or monthly income, however you want to do it on the apartment, I won't rent to them unless they have a co-signer or a roommate or whatever, because I know that how slippery a slope it is. And if, you know, they get sick and miss 3 days of work, they probably won't be able to pay rent. So, I mean, most of the people we're talking about are paycheck to paycheck. I mean,
Right.
it's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't kick anyone out, you know, if they make more money. I guess that was that your question? I was confused.
Yeah, I mean, because these, so let's say somebody, you know, pays 30% for their apartment and then they get a much better job or something, and they now are making a much more of an income, so that it's only 20%. Is that fine for you?
I don't, if they make more money, that's fine with me. Obviously, I usually encourage people. I mean, you know, if somebody's been in my apartment for a while and they've gotten raises and I can see it and so on and so forth, I usually encourage people to try to buy a home. I mean, I think
Yeah.
this leads kind of actually into our like last conversation topic, but I'm like, obviously my biggest goal is like a huge proponent of
Mm-hmm. Wealth
like
building and
home ownership and being able to get your starter home.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I think the affordability crisis we're looking at today is that just so many fewer people own homes or condos or apartments, whatever, than you know, in our history as a nation. So
Mm-hmm.
I know Lisa's had her
Well,
hand up a
let's-
little bit.
Yeah, Lisa, do you have a comment real quick? 'Cause I think we should probably move on to some of our other
Yeah,
topics here.
thought I heard someone say that Richmond does not have a police force.
Yeah,
Well, we do. We're paying a lot of money for it and we have one and they're good. So we have 4 officers on duty and a chief, a half a chief. So, and 4 or 5 cruisers. It's not cheap, I can tell you that, but we do have a police force.
Well, sorry, you're right. We're sharing them with Heinsberg, I should say. That was, you know.
Well, yes, we're taking half of a real police force. So,
Yeah.
you know, you can call it whatever you want, but it is a police force. They arrest people and chase perps and the whole works, you know. So I've seen it. And they also run homeless people out of the parking lots whenever necessary.
don't
So
get me started.
exactly. That's a whole nother subject. So okay, I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
So anything, just moving on to the next topic here. I know we had the water and sewer regulation policy. I don't think there was much of an update here to share. Anything folks wanted to share from our last meeting, really. I think Virginia, you're going to maybe connect with some other folks on the water sewer committee. And I know, Andrew, you're in the works of doing some research as well. But I don't think there was much to share unless anyone else wanted to bring anything up.
Yeah, I got pushed back twice. I'm currently scheduled to meet with somebody in Public Works at Essex on May 13th. And we'll see if I get their time, if they grace their presence with me. But I'm trying to dig around in a few towns and find some public officers that are willing to share their back end processes with how they approve and allocate water and sewer. Because as we've alluded to, that's a very prohibitive cost, and I can't think of somewhere in Richmond to build large scale housing without water and sewer. So that corridor there along the interstate would be great to expand some affordable housing or workforce housing right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect spot.
So I had a thought about this, and that is that, you know, right now it's in our ordinance that the way we fund an expansion of the water and sewer system is the end users, the end customers have to pay for it. That the existing customers cannot be asked to pay for any extension of the water and sewer system. That's a problem. So one thing that we might want to do before entertaining, I mean, we should have this background knowledge obviously first, but before entertaining the idea that we're going to extend the water and sewer system, is we should get a big map of the town, see where the water and sewer system is, and think about where it would go and what, you know, there's a very limited number of ways it looks like that it could be expanded. You know, a limited number of roads. You can go out West Main, you can go out East Main, you can go up the Jericho Road, you know, you can go on the Huntington Road. So we should look at those and see what the actual possibilities are, whether it looks to us like it would be a useful thing to do to have this discussion, which is going to be difficult and contentious, about expanding it through a different funding mechanism. We should see if it looks like there's a place that it would be useful to expand it. So that was just my thought, Mark, for a future topic, is to get a map, shows where the system is, where can it, you know, where can it go, and what would that get us if it went up that way, for instance, if it went up the Jericho Road or whatever.
Yeah. Also, we need to take into account the whole floodland overlay district, right? Because it looks great out on west on Route 2, but then you really think about it and you're like, probably this is just off the hand. I bet 50 to 80% of the developable lots out there, what you would consider developable, are not developable because they're in the floodplain. So it's like,
and there's wetlands there,
there's
and the
wetlands.
whole one side of West Main Street is in the floodplain. You know, you can only do one side of West Main. So, you know, I mean, I think it would be good to have that discussion about what would we be getting if we took it out this way or that way. You know, say we went up the Jericho Road and went, you know, past Valley View and Southview and all of that. Is that like a realistic thing to think that we might have those kind of buildings there? Or if we took it East Main, you know, down Cochrane Road, or down East Main Street to the VYCC and beyond, what would that look like? So anyway, I just thought that would be a useful exercise for us to go through so that we had some idea of what we would be getting if we went through this difficult process of writing a new ordinance for how it's going to be funded.
There's people smarter than me that have already done that. I'd be happy to see if they get on this call, but I have some developer partners that have mapped out various villages like Richmond that have limited sewer extensions because they've been frustrated in Heinsberg with their lack of sewer and water allocation. So they've mapped out the various corridors where there's excess land, 50 to 200 acre parcels that are along main corridors, minutes from public transportation, that have no current public water and sewer infrastructure. So when you look up Jericho Road, there's probably 6 parcels that are greater than 50 acres that if there was water and sewer expanded there due to Act 47, you would open up massive infrastructure opportunity. But does Richmond have the capacity to support that type through their school programs, their fire programs, their police programs? That's where these things collide every time. So I appreciate there is ample opportunity when those things would be expanded. There's also plenty of, I think we also have to factor in the environmental at times impact. My neighborhood I live in Southview Hidden Pines, and I've seen 4 new septics go in, and I can smell sewage walking through the neighborhood. Housing stock's about 40-ish years old, and that's when septics fail. And all that's running right down to Donahue Brook. And that new floodplain there, all of our drainage is going right there. Every last bit of it, of all of Southview drains through there. So there's values not just from what it could provide from opportunity for development, but it's also about maintaining a healthy water system feeding into the lake and also our local agriculture. There's going to be issues with septic systems throughout our housing stock, and it's all going down that way too. So that's the other edge of it, where if we took the time to expand systems, yeah, there's some folks now that would in Southview or Hidden Pines or Valley View that would have the benefit, and it would open up opportunity for more. We need not just apartment style studio housing. We need step up, like Matthew alluded to, housing where people grow equity and wealth over time. We need all levels of housing, not just, we don't even have a 1,600-foot ranch available in Richmond. So people have done that type of study, Virginia. There's opportunities up and down these corridors there's wide parcels of land. It's just you run into environmental objections and neighbors that try to object to every last thing, and you can't get to the finish line, so nobody wants to do it.
Well, I mean, so all of the kinds of things that you just said, like about the Southview and the septic getting old and all that, that's exactly the kind of thing that I think we should understand. You know, things that we know about, and maybe these people who have done this work, can we get that work? Can we have them talk to us? Can we look at a map with this work on it? Because,
Yeah,
you know, we're not going to expand in all directions at the same time anyway. So what's the biggest bang for the buck with the least problems, you know, the least environmental degradation or whatever, the best case for us to expand, you know, is it this way? Is it that way? Is it the other way? I mean, like whatever you just said was great for the kind of discussion that I would like to see going on and for the kind of information to be brought forth. So I don't know. I just think it's important. And obviously we're going to have the pushback from the neighbors. But if we come up with an actual concept and that we've looked at all these different directions, and here's the problem with this one, but here are the opportunities, you know, here are the costs with this one here, but here are the opportunities. And it looks like we had a plan for it, then I think that would be much better background. I mean, it's going to take a while, obviously, to get this moved forward, but it would look like we had gone through the options and, you know, figured out the costs and benefits of these different things. So anyway, if you can get hold of that information or those people, or, you know, I mean, can we talk to them or?
yeah. They're on the docket. It's a development group, so it's that dirty D word. But they look, some of it is probably proprietary, but I'm sure they would be happy to provide insight about how they identify the corridors that are the most desirable for them to invest in. It's a matter of when you talk about doing what you're doing, there generally needs to be a developer on the other side that's willing to take down the financing and has the capital to produce the number of units that would make sense to make an expansion like that. And the folks that I know don't have an appetite to invest in Richmond because it's known to be a challenging area to get through the DRB for something to get approved for new residential units.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody sent a Williston thing about how they grade things, about what's the cost, what's the impact. I think it was Connie or maybe Virginia, and the Schneiders and the Shepherds and the BlackRock groups, they do the same thing, and they look for zip codes that make sense to invest their time and energy into, and we're not a zip code that makes sense to them because generally speaking, it's the water and sewer and lack of accessibility.
Yeah, and to build on that, there are definitely physical limitations in the town of Richmond. I mean, you just have slopes and wetlands and floodplains all over the place, and water and sewer, quite frankly, in the village, we're pretty much built out. I mean, there's some infill we can do, there's some building out we can do, but I mean, we're just about saturated. I mean, honestly. I know that Virginia and I talk about this, and a lot of times, we should be able to go up. We need to go up. We can't go out, but we have a 35-foot restriction. So that's an issue too. But I mean, my point is that there are definitely physical limitations with development, no doubt. I wouldn't want to come here. I mean, there's no doubt. I think as far as getting it through the DRB, I don't think that's a big issue. It certainly isn't with my department with issuing permits, but it's finding the land.
Yeah, when I say the DRB, I mean the objecting neighbors that have the power to challenge. Like it drags things down in time's money. Like Hillview, for instance, that was a conforming project that got dragged through environmental courts that cost money, and those dollars passed down to the next home buyer of that property.
You're 100% right, Andrew. Yep.
Yeah, well, so for me, it would be really helpful for me to see where those limitations are. Where do you have mostly floodplain? Where, and Route 2 in both directions has floodplain on both sides. Does that overweigh the value of thinking about building there? I mean, I don't feel like I have a grip on that particularly. Southview direction doesn't seem to have the floodplain limitation. Is it just a neighbor's problem there, or what are the factors? I think it would be good to know that. Anyway.
Well, Andrew, if there's something that maybe we could have at a future meeting in regards to that, that would be helpful. If you have any context, that would work. Okay. All right. So committees and goal work it was on the agenda. I think it was more so Matt and Andrew being our newest members and having been on the committee for a little bit, just thinking about, like, in your minds, where could this committee maybe further step in, further work, provide the most value to our town or have the biggest impact. So I don't know if either of you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this a little bit. Virginia and I were at the conversation. My whole kind of thought process to try to help this entire issue has been around affordable home ownership units. And again, it's an idea. I don't have a real action item on that yet necessarily, except for clearly in Richmond, we have a problem with actual square footage limitation, right? Acreage, especially with respect to water and sewer. So I don't see us having a traditional style starter home development in Richmond ever again, like nowhere. It's never, there's no spot, no real space for it. So my only alternative was essentially, thinking along that thought process of There are parcels in the village that still currently have development, not even including the buttermilk parcel. The hardware store tried to expand / build the grocery store. There's some land there owned, I think, obviously by Dan, the hardware store owner.
Mhm.
I think, an example like that is, I don't know how many units we could get in there. I don't know any of those statistics, but it's like, that would be a great spot to build, condo style, apartment home ownership, affordable home ownership units. And that's kind of my whole thought process, and I've kind of steered my business towards, we bought some land in Starksboro to build some condos there actually. And they're going to be, again, relatively affordable. They're going to be anywhere from $310,000 to $330,000, which is for 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1,500 square feet or 1,300 square feet. So that's relatively affordable. I don't know where that would fall on the area median income, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of, right? And that's the kind of workforce affordable home ownership housing that that I think we should be trying to aim for, and it's still profitable. I'm still gonna do with no subsidies. My partner and I will still end up doing quite well on these. So, anyways, it's doable.
Matt, do you know the developer who did the houses on Perpetual Lane in
Perpetual Lane.
Richmond?
I don't know him. You have alluded to him before. Him and I have never met, and I'm not sure I've actually even driven by those or not. Perpetual Lane.
Yeah, it's down towards Jonesville. It's down.
It's right near LeBounty
Right
Lane.
Yep, it's almost across the street from LeBounty Lane.
Yeah. I always forget the name of it. Yes, those
on the
are
other side.
those are quite densely packed in there. Are they quite affordable? I don't actually know.
Yeah, and that developer at one point was complaining, I forget to who, about why people weren't making more affordable housing, that it was quite doable and that he was making these affordable houses. And
And making
I
money,
always wanted
right?
to get him to come to talk to the planning commission, but then I sort of forgot his name and he fell off the chart, and we never did actually talk to him, but he sort of wanted to promote the building of affordable housing. So
Yeah. Well,
I'd like to find out who he is, and
I'd like to find out who he is too. And I have a little bit of a thought process on this, and we can discuss it more in the next meeting. But I think we've had a huge change in the culture of way houses are built. It used to be builders were smaller, kind of like my group, 4 or 5 guys, and you do everything, right? We do almost everything except for the sheetrocking because nobody can stand that anymore. So that's the only thing we sub out is the sheetrocking, but we do everything else. So if you're able to do that, you're able to vertically integrate it, make it more affordable, and you can still make good money on it. But most of the home builders now, especially all the bigger ones, even the medium-sized ones, there is the foundation guy, there's the framers, there's the, insulators, there's the side, or anyways, the list goes on and on. Well, when you add on these layers of subcontractors, the price starts to get astronomically higher. It cost me probably $5,000 to $10,000 more to hire the sheetrockers to do my house than if we had done it ourselves with my, with my crew. So, I mean, just looking at those numbers right there, you're thinking, well, if everybody's adding this a little bit here and there, right? Because that's the way it is, a subcontract, prices get inflated, and these guys aren't, the subs aren't stealing, you know what I mean? That's the market rate or whatever.
Right.
It's a lack of to make homes be built faster and to make more of them, we've lost a little bit of I don't know how to say it, the vertical integration of it, So
well, the sheetrockers get to charge more because nobody wants to do it, right?
that's
Worth
absolutely
every penny.
right.
Worth every penny.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to chime in about on that topic, on the topic of just goals, work of the committee in general?
I would say mine's more long-term focused than anything in the interim. I see our housing stock along main streets. It's older. There's rehabs going on already on both sides. That just need they're kind of poorly used areas, spaces with as much open greenery there is. The greenery's great, don't get me wrong, but just eventually in 25 years, what does the village look like? That's more of my curiosity and motivation to be here. Is how's the town going to change and transition over time, because everything grows and growth is hard, but it's inevitable everywhere. So just mapping out and being a part of the process of what that looks like, that's really what it is. Education.
Andrew, I
around
completely agree with you too, since obviously all three properties we own in, well, sorry, the two properties in the village we own in Richmond are all along the Main Street corridor, East Main Street specifically. And when we bought 3 years ago, the building we renovated should have been torn down. A lot of these old buildings should be torn down, but because of existing regulations, the
Right.
economics of it doesn't work out. And this is a classic thing over and over again. It's why the property at the end of West Main Street that should have been torn down, which could have been 14 or 15 units of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, $300,000 to $400,000 homes, is now being renovated by somebody, and I think it's a second
Right.
home. So I don't have a problem with second homes, but it's like, ugh.
Why is it more difficult to tear it down than to rehab it?
Because the numbers don't work. You can't pay
Yeah,
$425,000 for the lot, pay $20,000 for the house to be torn down, and then build more. You need
Yeah.
a discount on your cost per lot, or the numbers don't work, and then the housing costs $500,000 to sell a 3-bed condo. The numbers just don't work.
right.
So what is that? What is it that we can do about that?
Well,
The
Virginia,
town
Provide-
or the planning commission or the
Provide the
zoning? or-
zoning,
yes,
provide the zoning, the vision, and the tax incentive to have people redevelop corridors of
Yeah,
the whole structure everywhere. Housing's going to
comes
have to
down
be rethought in the future.
yeah, Virginia, when you and I met, the basically it was through the planning commission, through the increased density in this village RC district. We need to, the quickest way to do it would be to drastically increase, the density per acre, essentially.
Yeah.
Five now.
And that's the ticket right there, because then the economics of it all work out. You can spend $400,000, for example, that property at the end of West Main Street,
Yep.
as your cost per unit is only $40,000 for the land, right? Which is, the economics work that way. So
So it's a density thing.
it's all about, it's all
Ye-
density. That's yes, exactly.
And everybody panics about density, but the fact of the matter is it would take 25 years for it to play out through a place like Richmond, because not everybody's moving all at once, and not
Right.
everybody, there's not always a developer there ready to invest
The
a
opportunity.
couple $1 million into a new event. So it would take a while for it to actually happen. It just needs to start happening sometime, is really what I would think. Like there was right there on Jericho Road, right behind Umiak, that building sold for what, $575 or something for 6 tiny 1-beds. And is he
motel?
Airbnb-ing those now?
motel?
0.3 acres. I really wanted to buy it and make a big building on it, but
I looked at it too, and it wasn't feasible. Yeah, so
yeah.
Right.
So-
But the structure that's there just doesn't make sense for that space. It's too valuable real estate to be what it is.
yeah, because it's a
So-
giant ranch.
We're talking instead of going to a density of 5 units per acre, let's say, going to a density of 10 units per acre or 20 units per acre or something,
I think
right?
for your perspective, because you know how hard this is to pass this through, how many times you guys have worked on this through the planning commission. If we're at statewide as 5 units an acre, I think even doubling it to 10, you would probably get less pushback. If you went 20, I mean, heck, if you said 20 units an acre, I'd be a little disappointed if that passed because I just built these houses. I'd want,
Right.
You should have bought that property, right?
yeah, I'd be like, so, but I think you're going to have better luck if the planning commission, sorry, when I say you, if it's a number that we can look at from an economic perspective that works, but
Yeah.
not a number that's like everyone, holds their breath. So
What a lot of developers will do is, in this conversation, you're talking 5, 10, or 20. They say, okay, well, we want 20. And then people are like, oh my God, I can't do
Right.
20. Okay, well, how about 10?
Right.
And then everybody's happy. So
Right.
generally speaking, when trying to increase density from a mindset perspective of how it's impacting by the general consumer, starting higher and then settling in the middle ground typically is a win-win for all parties.
yeah,
And it's presented and received much better because it could be 20 units per acre. You can have that. Plenty of places do. 10 probably makes sense. That would be a helpful step in the right direction, probably.
Hmm. I know the legislature apparently has been talking about going to 12 units per acre as a minimum because they understand that, as some people on the planning commission do, that 5 in the village is probably not actually doing very much. So I don't know. It's the political point is, how do you get there, basically?
yeah.
And
I mean, we have an old 3-unit, and if it was 12 units an acre right now, I would be knocking that down next summer. Like,
Right.
it's that simple.
Right.
There's a lot. I think there's actually other landlords in the Richmond area that, actually Don Moran, who we bought this property from, would.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And anything else besides density that is crucial to working on this? Or is it just the density question? I mean, I suppose it's lot coverage and setbacks and stuff that are, if you're going to have more units, then you need to be able to cover more of the land. But okay, never mind. We don't have to go there right now.
Yeah.
I think the changes on Act 47 did clean some things up because if I'm not mistaken, they removed certain applicable objections to environmental court, including does not fit the character of the area. And that's been a very commonly leaned on tactic to delay
Right.
projects.
Yep.
So obviously a 9-unit right on Main Street does not fit the character of the area, but it should in the future. We have to be future looking and not back here. So
Right.
that, to your question, Virginia, language like that and just thought processes like that about not time is money. So making it easy. Winooski makes it really simple for somebody to come in, invest in real estate, produce a product really quickly that meets the market demands. So
Yep.
creating an atmosphere where it feels like people are welcome to bring ideas
Right.
versus it being, oh, that's gross. Don't do that to us.
Right. Yep. Well, and the housing consultant that provided the report for the beginning of this committee's work did say, creating a culture, a welcoming culture, a YIMBY culture, not a NIMBY culture, was crucial here. So this committee has been kind of tentatively making steps towards doing that. That is very hard work, obviously, politically. It's much harder than making the regulations. Anyway.
That's why I rejoined the committee, because I saw the Front Porch Forum posts flying around that were very NIMBY.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't believe how many people have said for the house that I'm building in the backyard, I can't believe they let you build that.
Yeah.
I've had at least 3 or 4 people walk by. There's one house. It is a big house, relatively, for the spot.
Yeah,
but
sure.
that's that's what you're looking at. So
Yeah. Yeah, I always wish I could take people to Cambridge, Mass, where I have to go frequently because I have an older brother who lives there. But the way the buildings are situated, all right, there's some kind of echo going on. Just, cheek by jowl, little buildings, big buildings, they're all, and I would have loved to see it, like a time-lapse film of how it worked, that they were able to get all of these buildings so close together and they work, and it's nice. And anyway, never mind.
All right, great. Well, thank you for sharing your perspectives there. I think the last item is we have the OneDrive that was set up by Keith. I know that we used to have a Google Drive, and that data got lost when the town transitioned. So if anyone has any of our original documents, I'm probably looking at you, Virginia, and
Mhm.
Connie, if she listens to this, to like re-upload those. So I know like basically all that work that we had the intern do, et cetera, is no longer available. So I don't know if anyone has any of that information locally on their own computers that we could maybe re-upload and populate in that Microsoft OneDrive.
Well, that should be in Revi's files, Keith. Do you know if it's in his files, all that information, or?
He's looked. We've had a couple conversations on this
Okay,
and
all
hasn't
right,
been able to find
sure.
those documents.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure I have
um,
some of those documents and the study by the consultant and stuff. Do you have that on there, or?
I believe the study is on the homepage.
yeah, the study's on the website, I believe. But maybe
Okay.
we just need to go back and upload some of those things to the actual OneDrive
Yeah,
folder.
whatever you have,
that
if you could
just
populate it,
created.
that'd be great. Yeah,
Okay, if I can get to it, I'll do that.
Okay.
I have faith.
And I know that we've been populating the resources document. I just put some like the VHFA chart that we were all talking about in there tonight as well. But any other items to add that either are like, hey, people could potentially come and talk to us, or just other resources to add there, I think that would be helpful. And that's in the folder as well, the housing resources list that Connie started. So there's some things that are being populated in there as well.
I see. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so it's RHC Working Docs is the name of the folder.
Yeah. And then the last thing is next meeting, we have a potential for the it's the Heinsberg Affordable Housing Committee Chair Carl Bolin has offered to come and visit our committee. We have him tentatively scheduled for next month. If that's something that we want to do, we have about a half hour of his time. And if he was to come, anything that folks want to have him specifically chat about to our committee.
Yeah, Heinsberg just had a huge development get, I believe, knocked back down or whatever, right?
Mhm.
I'm not too
It was
familiar on the whole.
reduced.
Yeah, so that would be interesting.
Yeah,
I
on
don't know.
donated land by NRG Systems gave them a huge chunk of land, but yeah, I mean, I looked at all of their stuff that they have, their affordable housing, and I do want everybody to remember that their committee was started, the Housing Committee, Affordable Housing Committee, in 2004. So we shouldn't feel bad that we don't have a lot of affordable housing yet, because 2004, they've had a long time to lead into this, right? So anyway. But that would be fine. I mean, if he has applicable things to say, like getting started, if you don't get large chunks of land donated to you by big employers in the neighborhood, which we don't really have. But
Well,
let me just
I thought the biggest thing with that was Heinsberg, how it got shot down because of the flood, again, the flood overlay district there, right? Wasn't that? And I'm kind of paraphrasing here. I'd have to reread the article I read, but it was in VT Digger. It was a relatively large development that got shut down because they were afraid of the way they were going to infill in the floodland, even though it was FEMA approved or whatever. Anyways, but most of Heinsberg's developable land is actually in a floodplain as well, actually, close to their village, actually. So I also know we're running out of time. We should continue these
Yeah.
discussions probably.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah.
Yep, we are. Okay, so I'll extend the invite to Carl to join the first 30 minutes. Anything else that folks want to talk about for next month? Keith, you want to bring in the second draft of the definitions? We can discuss that.
Yeah, if you hang on a second, I gotta get my work. Yep, I got it right here. Yeah, so yeah, we'll get that second draft with the nomenclature on it that we're hopefully going to standardize.
Okay. Great. Anything else?
That should do it, I would think.
That's all.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you all.
And we're, Keith and I are going to have to decide kind of a little bit what to do with the Josie thing that came to us. We're going to have to decide what
Yeah, I'm
to do
concerned
with it.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, whether this is a public document or isn't a public document, or, I mean, our next meeting obviously is going to be way after the deadline. The planning commission's next meeting is after the deadline. Select board is after the deadline. It's kind of, anyway, so we'll use it as a spur for the further conversation that we could have talking about that granting opportunity.
Yep.
Okay. All righty. Well, we'll call it.
All right.
All right, everybody
Thank
have
you
a
all.
great evening.
Have a
Great.
good evening. Yep.
Thanks so much. Yep.